What was more difficult? Coming out as conservative or coming out as trans?
Definitely coming out as conservative.
Susanna, first of all, you shot on the scene in this political world that we're in. I started seeing your videos. A lot of people probably started seeing your videos. You're not from England. Where are you from?
So I'm Polish, but when I was 8 years old, my mom and I moved to Copenhagen, Denmark, just for job reasons. You know, it can be hard for a single mother in Poland. So that was basically our journey to the West and discovering new political views and political ideas and multiculturalism. So yeah.
What are you doing in England then?
So I always went to an international school. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to go to an English-speaking school, and then it was always the dream to come to the UK to study here. And I wanted to be a lawyer for a really long time. So there was, you know, I thought of maybe a career in politics, but I never really thought that I was gonna do this journalism adventure, and
It's just landed on you.
yeah, it just landed on me, very much so.
What do you think of England? What do you think of what's currently happening in the country?
I always looked at the United Kingdom as this, as the place where free speech, where rights, where property rights, where liberties originated from. This British way of thinking, British way of living, capitalism. I always wanted to be part of this country and be here and study here and meet people. And I always thought that it is full of opportunities. And yes, I was fortunate enough to meet beautiful people and come across amazing traditions, but I've also started to notice the problems that this country and the West has. And I can see a lot of these reflections or similarities between Denmark and the United Kingdom with cultural disagreements and lack of integration, and I feel that, and the death of free speech as well. And I think that people like myself, even though I might not be British, I still feel like there is a role for me to talk about what happens when your government turns to the left, when you have a socialist state where the state restricts your rights, like it was in Poland. I remember growing up always hearing about how you could never say anything, how you could be prosecuted for saying anything against the state. In fact, my great-grandfather went to prison when my grandma was really, really young for distributing anti-communist leaflets. So I always grew up around this idea that, you know, as somebody who has these experiences, I feel like I have a lot to offer to the places where this cultural Marxism is slowly coming to.
I want to ask you some questions. I want to ask you questions that no BBC reporter would ask you. And I hope I don't offend you at times, so I'm just going to speak openly and honestly.
You're not going to offend me at all.
Susanna, was you a man?
So that is, of course, something that I guess needs to be addressed, and a fair question. I think that a lot of people have heard these rumors and saw some of the tweets that I tweeted in the past about my thoughts on where the LGBT community is going and how I disagree with a lot of the things they're doing. And there I was saying that, you know, as a trans person, I think that the community can do a lot more to, instead of annoy people, to actually achieve something for their rights and focus on the problems that we have. And so, question, was you a man, is if we look really deep into this, I was born biologically a boy, at least on the outside. And then when you look at sex, there are three things that make up biological sex. That's phenotypical, genotypical, and chromosomal. We don't use chromosomal testing that much anymore because it has become ineffective over time. So for example, since the 60s in the Olympics, you don't use chromosomes anymore as the only way to determine sex, because there were intersex people in the past who appeared completely feminine, had normal feminine testosterone levels, bone structures, but had chromosomes, male chromosomes. And so they were disqualified. And over time, the more we learned about sex and how it functions, the less we started to look at chromosomes, and we started to move to the genotype and the phenotypes as well. And phenotype is your appearance, okay, and genotype is basically your genes, which are affected by hormonal therapy. But also, when you look at the brain scans of trans people, and we have been doing this for the past 20 years, where the brains of trans people have been scanned post-mortem, but also during their life, and those scans revealed that the brains of trans people resemble more closely in most areas the brains of the gender they identify with. And so I always, in my own mind, compare it to being intersex in a lot of ways, just that with intersex people, you see the genitals on the outside as not matching that sex that they were assigned, or it's very difficult to assign what sex they have, whereas with trans people, it's all in the brain.
So, if you were born a boy, at what stage did you realise or feel?
So as I said, because it is so deeply in your mind, in your brain, and we see this not only as something that is imagined, we actually see it within those scans, and there is physical, tangible material that proves this. It's not something that I kind of just woke up and knew. It was always at the back of my mind. And so my earliest memory is knowing that I was a girl, and you know, when my mom wasn't looking, I would go upstairs to the attic and dress up as a girl and play house. I would put like so I would put a towel over my head and pretend that was hair. And whenever I was in the kindergarten,
What age was this?
3, 4,
Okay.
like my earliest memories.
So your earliest memories
Yeah.
were feeling feminine, feeling as a woman.
Absolutely. And you know, people often say, oh, you were doing feminine things and you liked feminine things. That doesn't mean you're the other sex. It just means that
That's why
you preferred other things, but it's not really true. We also have biological evidence showing that, for example, from the earliest stages, boys prefer, with a boy brain, prefer mechanical things, whereas baby girls, who are, you know, just a few weeks old, they prefer faces and facial expressions, and they respond completely differently. So there are naturally built-in differences between the brains of both sexes that determine certain innate behaviors. And so this is why you see a lot of trans people will say, oh, I love playing with dolls. Oh, I always wanted to embody that feminine spirit that I saw around my mom and what she did, and I loved cooking and shopping and whatever. And it's not just because they are boys who like girlish things. It's because their brain is structured in that way. And anybody can research this.
So, because that must be a burden to have lived with. That's what I want to know. Essentially, a woman trapped in a man's body, and you've grown up with that, and you've felt that. You've gone to school as a boy. All of that inner, that must have been a struggle to live with and to deal with.
So you see, I often compare this to an athlete, for example, who loved running and his legs were cut off or were broken, because you are like a bird stuck in a cage where you can't express yourself, you're not allowed to be yourself because you are bound by certain expectations.
Especially in Poland.
Especially in Poland, which it was really difficult because I was always very feminine.
When you was a boy?
Yes, absolutely. So, and I was bullied really, really hard.
You was bullied for being
very feminine.
Very feminine.
Yeah.
Or gay. Would they call you gay?
Oh yeah, of course, the F word for a gay person, and lady boy and stuff like that. So nobody. It was the same in Denmark though. Nobody thought.
Well, understood.
Oh yeah, nobody spoke about trans people. I didn't know anything like this existed.
I'd probably have been. I'm just being honest. Like, yeah, the non-understanding person to even ever thought about it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there are some social roles that bullying has, in a way, of kind of shaping people in a certain direction, bringing them to norms. And so I think that bullying, as long as it doesn't get excessive where you're beaten up and horribly abused mentally, I think that it can also have a positive impact on the way that you live. And so for me, for instance, it made me definitely a very strong person who was prepared to deal with the world that was to come once I transitioned, because living as a very effeminate boy was one thing, and then transitioning into a woman was completely different, a completely different experience.
How old are you?
I'm 19.
You're 19. You haven't... So many people right now, at this moment we're in, around the globe, in every country, try and use. I watch it, and in fact, I get quite. This whole transphobic trans argument that's come in the last 2 years. I think a lot of people feel like they're having it shoved down their throat about toilets and gender neutral this and gender neutral that, and it's quite frustrating to some people. But I'm obviously wanting to know from your point of view. You haven't tried to use this. You haven't actually come on the scene as a trans journalist. You've just come on the scene as a journalist, which I think is brilliant, because I've got to know you. A lot of people, in fact, I can remember when I first heard, and I was like, what? No! When someone said, yes, she's trans, and I was like, no! I couldn't believe it. There'll be a lot of people watching this that are going to be very surprised. But yeah.
Yeah, so I've actually gotten in trouble for criticizing a lot of the things that the LGBT movement does and what they stand for. I think they're focusing on things that are completely irrelevant. Who cares about gender-neutral bathrooms when you have issues like homelessness and lack of employment, poverty among the trans community? Why aren't these people addressing things that matter, that can actually impact somebody's life, change it, create charities that will perhaps help you find a job or get to university or change your life? You know, hold the bull by the horns and do something with yourself. Whereas a lot of these people just sit down and whine and cry about transphobia impacting their lives. I perhaps have been fortunate with my transition and having the access to the resources that I needed, even though I am from a working class family.
When did you transition? By transition, you mean full operation?
Yeah. So
you've had the full operation?
Yes. So at 18, it was legal, and during that summer, I got done what I wanted to have done.
Very recently?
Yeah. Well, it was really important for me to be able to be myself and be able to function in a society like any other woman would, at least phenotypically, so appearance-wise.
Yeah.
And
you couldn't.
No,
yeah.
I didn't feel like.
You
imagine
wouldn't?
going to the beach. Imagine having a normal heterosexual relationship. Imagine having a child in the future, and you know what children often do is bathe with their parents. I always wanted to have the most normal life possible, the most sort of typical male-female relationship. And you know, I had female roommates before, and you just can't tell. It's all.
Can I ask you something on that?
Sure.
I hope this isn't. If you was out and you met a man at a nightclub, would you tell him you're trans?
Well,
if a man went home with you.
Oh, I'm very religious, which might actually, you know, to a lot of people also be a surprise. But I would never do it on a night out. Get back home with anyone. But if I met somebody, then from the start, I would be honest, because what is the point of hiding it?
Okay. No, it's just, yeah. These are all things that are just, I hope you don't mind. Just
No, of course.
I've made comments as well. I actually made a tweet where they were talking about trans people going into kindergartens to speak with nursery children.
Oh, you mean drag queens? It was. I remember that, and I criticized.
I put a tweet out saying, and I said if a lady boy was introduced to my children in nursery school or junior school, I'd be angry. And I'm just being honest in the sense of I've met you, you're a lovely girl, and I wouldn't want to offend you. I'm just saying that there's certain things. I've also made comments where I've said, if my 10-year-old daughter was going into a toilet, and you mean drag queens, and someone who was trans was going in the toilet next to them with a penis, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. What's your take on those 2 points? Just so I hope that, yeah, I just want to know. They're things I've said in the past, and I'm someone who I don't care. You be who you want to be, darling. I'm very liberal in all my views of that. I don't mind about much. It's only when it starts. It's only when you start, which I think a lot of the public have started to see. Well, hold on a minute. It's being pushed now, and you're trying to change everything and make everything, and sitting here with you is very So I'm grateful for the opportunity to ask you questions. You've been through this experience.
So let me address the first point. When it comes to the bathrooms, you don't have pissoirs in female bathrooms, right? You have stalls. So nobody and you know, there is that idea that a lot of trans people look like men in dresses, but that's not really the case. And it's the only reason people think that is because you can only tell that someone's trans if they actually look like in a specific way. They're perhaps at the beginning of their transition, or they transitioned really late. But it's, you know, usually with trans people, you just wouldn't be able to tell when they go into the bathroom. Okay. So, you know, there isn't really an opportunity for a baby girl to see, you know, anything like that. But also on top of this, there's never been a case where a trans person assaulted somebody in the bathroom. There have been cases where trans people, or like trans women, were forced to use the men's bathroom, and then something has happened to them. But I've always, whenever I think about this, for me, it's always been so important to transition completely from top to bottom. And so it's sometimes very difficult for me to understand how someone can just like choose to exist as a woman with male genitals. It's kind of, how can you claim that you're a woman and then not want to like fully, at least phenotypically, be a woman, you know, and have that normal heterosexual relationship? And I think they're just a lot of the time making life a lot more difficult for themselves. But just to go to the second point that you mentioned about the LGBT community just sort of pushing all of those changes upon people, I see that quite a lot as
Even
well.
logos on traffic lights.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's completely pointless, because I feel like people have started becoming obsessed about this and thinking, oh my God, is this person trans? Oh, you look slightly more masculine. Because, you know, not all women look like Kim Kardashian, right? There are variations within women and how they look, and they can be taller and have deeper voices, and some can have more masculine facial features. You know, this doesn't really determine much. And so, because the trans community has been talking about this constantly, it seems like people are becoming obsessed about where are these hidden trans people. But also there's other things, this coming into education system, people being taught identity politics. You have to employ trans people. For example, if there was a scheme in some sort of a firm that I was applying to where they had a quota for trans people, I would be really upset if I got a job there, because I would be thinking that the only reason I got that job is because I'm a minority. And that is just something that allows people to undermine your credentials and what you have achieved. And that has never been what I asked for.
That's happening across the board, not just with trans, that's happening with
all minorities, and I think that's completely pointless. And same with, you know, trans people. I remember a while back I organized this conservative event on my campus, university campus, to
You're
promote.
conservative, we haven't spoke about that, you're a conservative.
I identify as a conservative, yes, but we spoke, I'll explain that in a second.
Yeah.
But we spoke about conservative values on campus and free speech and exchange of ideas, and we had a banner. Under that banner it said things like abortions, gun control, and then one of the topics on the very bottom was 2 or 72 genders. And we actually got told to shut the event down because one of the people got offended because they identified as non-binary, they identified as no gender. And I just
what
think,
do you think of no gender?
There's 2 genders, obviously it correlates with your sex.
Because I'd always say just I'll shut up, there's men and women.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that you saying that there is no gender, that just invalidates the whole trans argument. Because the point of being trans is to transition from one gender to the other. And you saying that, oh, gender doesn't exist, it's not there, then you're saying that, oh, the trans experience doesn't exist.
What do you say? Because some people say it's a mental health issue.
Being non-binary? Oh, being
non-binary,
transgender?
trans, all of these, some people say it's a mental health issue.
Yeah, and they said that homosexuality is a mental issue in the 80s
right.
as well. But there is some merit to some of these arguments, because you can see these structural differences in the brain.
And I guess it would cause mental health. You know, if you felt the way you feel so strongly as a woman, living as a man, that must be a big burden on your health.
So a lot of trans people have like anxiety and depression, and those are mental health illnesses that often correlate with gender dysphoria. But I think that, you know, saying that, oh, gender dysphoria is a mental illness, oh, that's so bad. Erectile dysfunction is a mental illness as well. And so, you know, there's loads of these things that fall within the categorization of what mental illness is. And so I don't think it's per se necessarily something to be so ashamed of, even if it was a mental illness, because it's not, I always say, if it's a mental illness, then it's not a choice. That's often the argument that people bring. Oh, you have a mental illness and you chose to be that way.
Why would you choose a life of,
exactly.
a life of all that stress?
You can choose not to transition, or you can choose to transition, but you can't choose not to have those feelings. You know? It's same like you can choose not to have gay sex, but you can't choose not to be gay.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's often people don't feel like they're passing, or they feel like they still look like men, or they have some sort of anxiety that kind of strengthens.
You've done a good transition.
Sorry?
You've done a good transition.
I think so as well. So often these people have the perception that they cannot exist in the society. They're scared to leave their house. I don't know many trans people, but I've spoken to some, and that's often their experience, and I think it's a really sad life.
What do you think of the representatives of the trans community in the UK?
I think it's really upsetting, and I think we can do a lot better. I mean, think about Monroe Bergdorf.
That's what I was going to say.
First thing she said was, all white people are racist, everyone is transphobic. What is that? How is this a way to create tolerance and acceptance? If you want people to tolerate you, then you have to also be tolerant. I'm sorry, but acceptance is a two-way stream, right? If you want people to look at you and say, fine, I'm gonna treat you with respect, I'm gonna treat you like who you are and take you for who you are, then you also have to give something, because we are the minority. And if the minority, such a tiny minority, is going to try and change the world, well, they're not going to get far, you know?
Have you been worried about this moment? Because you've come on the scene, you're making videos, lots of people are following you. You've got quite a big online following already. Yeah, your videos are getting good hits. I think you got 60,000 for our Day of Freedom rally. Has this been a constant worry in the back of your mind when this comes out?
It has been a horrible worry at the back of my mind. In fact, I thought that once all of this comes out, then all my journalistic opportunities will just fade. I was worried that people wouldn't understand, that they wouldn't want to work with me. And even if they did, I was worried that I was going to be a token for the conservatives. Oh, look, we have a trans conservative. We're not all that transphobic and homophobic. But I was so fortunate, and I'm so grateful for not having experienced this, at least from the people around me. I feel that everybody's reaction was just like, oh, you know, if I saw that hate about you or those rumors about you on Twitter, I wouldn't even care. And of course we want to work with you, and we think you're talented. And I think that that's something that conservatives often think that conservatives often have, is that they prioritize talent and hard work over other attributes.
They don't really care.
Yeah, they don't really care. It's just, oh, okay, well, fair enough. And I think that it will be perhaps different if that's the only thing I spoke about. If I
haven't spoke about, which I think is really...
If I shove this down people's throats.
I think the fact that no one's known. I think that the fact that a lot of people are going to be sitting there going, whoa on this.
Yeah, so I think, I feel like I've been very fortunate with how people have reacted. Yes, there have been a lot of people on the internet, and...
yeah, I was going to go to this.
Yes.
So you've had the alt-right, you've had, which you will have, the genuine fascists, yeah? Of which, in the circles you're going to move in, I don't expect you'll meet very many, right? Not compared to what the media tell you. And if I had one bit of advice, if there's anyone who was going to give you a hard time over this, anyone at all, then fuck them. Simple. That's it. Because I think you'll receive, as I said to you, I think you'll receive a very positive reaction from people when you meet them.
Well, I hope so. And yeah, on the internet, as you said, some people just make fun of it, call me a degenerate, even though I live a more traditional life than a lot of other people. And I do have a lot of integrity, and I do treat myself with respect. And I think that if somebody's going to call me a degenerate just because of that, and they're going to hate on me just because of being trans, then yeah, as you said, that's their problem, and I'm not going to waste my time on them.
Simple question now. What was more difficult, coming out as conservative or coming out as trans?
Definitely coming out as conservative. However sad that sounds, coming out as a conservative was
2018.
Was absolutely very difficult. I remember telling my mom I was trans. It was really hard for her to take.
When did you tell your mum?
I just turned 15 when I told her. So
surely your mum knew. Surely your mum.
Oh, she knew. She absolutely knew.
Picked up on everything.
And the first time we sort of spoke about it was when I was 7 years old. And
you were 7?
Yeah, I was 7 when I said, "Oh, Mom, I feel I'm a girl," and I expressed that sentiment. And she actually she took it really seriously, and she took me to a psychologist, and she wanted to find out what is wrong and how can she help me. But thing is, psychologist just said, "Oh, she's being raised by a single parent, by a mother, so that's the only example she has." And nobody ever spoke about this stuff.
Lots of kids are raised by single parents.
Yeah, exactly. I know, but this just wasn't something that you talked about. This was just not something that existed. It was taboo. Like, oh, you can change your gender.
Nobody taboo. It's only just come on the. It's only just really.
Thanks to Caitlyn Jenner, who is a conservative Republican, and she has done more for trans rights.
Who a lot of the LGBT attack.
Oh yeah, they hate her. They think she shouldn't be a representative of the community, but she has done more for trans rights than any other trans activist in the past decade.
You're actually going to do more in this interview.
And then there was also, of course, coming out as a conservative. And I remember when I actually took a screenshot of Lauren Southern's video where she says, "Why I'm not a feminist." That was the video she made. And I posted on my Facebook saying, "This is why I'm not a feminist." And everybody in my school, everyone was writing about it and saying, "How can you not be a feminist? That's crazy. Who do you think you are? All these women's rights, you should be grateful for what you have, yada, yada, yada." And I always said that having had the experience of being on both sides, I think it's much more difficult for the boys than it is for the girls today. I think that the standard of my life has improved tremendously. But yeah, I got
while becoming a woman.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. Very funny, Tommy. But yeah, I got disinvited from a few birthday parties, blocked on Facebook.
For coming out as a conservative?
Oh yeah, people.
Not for being trans?
No, not
I
for being
thought
trans.
when you mentioned that earlier, it was for being trans, you got disinvited by all these parties, but it was for being a conservative.
Oh yeah, people just went ballistic. I mean, I went to a school where, yes, I did have some friends, but a lot of people were Bernie supporters, and there was not a single Trump supporter during the election. It was super
left-wing. Well, there probably was, but they were quiet, because they had to be.
Well, maybe, yeah, but nobody talked about it. Trump
about
was like persona non grata. And so when I came out as a conservative, it was crazy. Now I'm not in touch with really anyone except for maybe like one of my best friends. And my profile picture on Facebook is me with a MAGA hat, so.
So your life has completely changed?
Completely, yeah. And it all started with me going to the Sargon Fakat event where he was attacked by Antifa. And recording that went pretty viral on Twitter. Yeah.
Who's been an inspiration to you?
My mom.
Your mum?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, she's always been a fighter. I've never seen her upset over life. I've never seen her whine. I've never seen her complain. She always takes the life as it is. She fights. She plows through.
I guess
she's an amazing woman.
Something a lot of people should think about, is how difficult it must be for someone who's trans. I've never thought about that or think about it. I guess it must have been a difficult journey. But the support base, I'll just be openly and honest, the support base of people who are going to be watching this would be the people who would say, Ladyboys, this. I was the same. It's something I never thought about, but I would be the same in the sense of the comments I've made to you already that I've made, and the support base, and for people to understand and see you for who you are, then I think you're doing a good thing.
I hope so. And with these lady boys and these comments, I think you should be, as I said, I am a free speech absolutist, so you should be allowed to say whatever you want to say. But I think it's also important
you have the full ops, you're not a ladyboy.
Exactly. So it's more like in Thailand you see lady boys, but I get what you mean.
Yeah, I wish you luck.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thanks, Sam. I just want to say a personal thank you to every single person who supported me. I couldn't bring you these videos without your support. We have no big funders, no big donators. So this is literally by you, for you. So I want to say a personal thank you. And if anyone else wants to keep up to date with what we're doing, we've got plenty of exciting things coming up now. I've gone independent. You can do so at tommyrobinson.online. Thank you.